Marvel Snap is a unique digital card game because you can't actually collect every single card on day one of playing the game. In majority of card games, you can just spend a whole load of money and then have access to every single card that's available. But in Marvel Snap, it's completely different. You have to progress through the collection road by earning your cards. To make sure that things are somewhat balanced, Team Second Dinner went ahead and made 3 collection pools for you to get cards from. In this series, I'm going to review how your collection, decks, and keywords evolve as you progress through Marvel Snap's collection road. Alright, so here's a quick roadmap of what it looks like for discard in general. I just have some decks put together here. We're going to get into depth on each one and each pool separately. But to kick things off, you have pool 1, which is collection level 18 to 214. There's about 70 cards there to get you familiar with basic mechanics of the game. And then you have pool 2, which is collection level 222 to 474. There's only about 50 cards. That's the smallest pool in Marvel Snap. And in terms of discard, there's only actually 2 cards we'll get to that are in pool 2 with the text discard. Then we have pool 3, which is collection level 486 and on. This is the biggest pool with the craziest cards, and it's a lot of fun. So that's the roadmap for discard. Now let's get into the cards that actually have discard in their text. All right, so when I was putting this together, I was quite shocked. There's only 16 cards in Marvel Snap at this moment in time, right before release, that have the word discard, that utilize the keyword discard. And if you have a look at the energy curve, there's a few anomalies. So majority of the discard cards fall in the 3-drop category. So there's cards like Moon Knight, Gambit, Lady Sif, Black Cat. Now a few of these were changed in recent buffs and nerfs, so this wasn't always the case, and it won't be the case in the future. These are bound to change. But for right now, we have a lot of 3-drops that do a lot of the same thing, which I think is congesting the discard viability of their decks. But one of the interesting things about discard, and I think it's something that Team Second Dinner might have underestimated, is that how well the synergy works together. So they overcompensated by giving more power to these cards. So if you look at the power chart, there's a lot that are 6 power, but they're actually mostly not that expensive. They're like 3-drops or 4-drops. So you get a lot of payoff immediately because you're discarding cards, which in theory should be a negative effect. But there's things like Morbius, there's things like APOC, Hela, Dracula. There's ways to manipulate the discards that is actually a benefit for you. And you get the high power upside. Another interesting thing that I noticed here is that there's only actually 2 6-drops in the discard pool, which is pretty wild because usually those are the cards that you build your decks around. And these do respectively have their own decks, many actually. But it'd be nice to get a few more extra 6-drops for discard. So you have Hela and Apocalypse. Both are fantastic, really great cards, but it'd be interesting to see more. All right, let's have a look at what cards are in pool 1. So here we have Blade, Wolverine, Lady Sif, Swordmaster, and Apocalypse. So these are all great cards to get you going because they're pretty basic. Blade, Swordmaster, and Lady Sif are just going to discard cards. Apocalypse gets extra power if he's discarded, so that's the payoff for the early discard decks. And then Wolverine, he's going to get thrown to a random location. Honestly, not that great of a card, but kind of good if you're trying to build some kind of discard deck at this point in time. Because when I started, I was really excited about making a discard deck. I love that kind of ability of damaging my hand or my cards or something like that for payoff. But what I found is that the only payoff here is actually Apocalypse, and if I never draw him or if I don't hit the right discard, then a lot of these cards are actually hurting my ability to play cards, to do what else, the other things that I want to do, get power out there. So I find discard is one of the weaker decks when you're just starting your Marvel Snap journey. But here on the right, I have a deck that I think is not too shabby. The payoff is either Apocalypse or Strong Guy. If we never draw Apocalypse, then we should be able to dump our hand so there's no cards left in our hand, and Strong Guy gets his buff, which is plus 6 power. Alternatively, if we end up drawing APOC, then we can try to focus discard him by using things like Swordmaster, Lady Sif is fantastic, and Blade. And hopefully they hit, and we get a big APOC, and we win the game. Another card that is great is Angela. If you play her first and then play your discard things, that's going to stack one location, and then you hopefully APOC at another location, and that's how you win those games. So that's pool 1. Now let's see where we can evolve from here. Pool 2. This is a very minor evolution of the discard pool, but we have 2 staples being added, which is Morbius and Swarm. Morbius gets a benefit for each card you've discarded this game, and Swarm is going to get, when he's discarded, go back to your hand as a 0 cost and make a copy of himself, which can get absolutely out of hand. So as you can see, I've added those two into our decks, and I've cut Sentinel and Scarlet Witch because they were just kind of fillers at that point in time, and we have better options available now. I've also added the Collector and Sunspot over Ant-Man and Medusa because I think they're a little bit stronger, and the Collector is actually a pretty neat one because he's going to get buffed for each time Swarm goes back in our hand and Apocalypse goes back in our hand. So it actually finds a way to have discard synergy, so long as we don't discard him. And I have Sunspot in here because he's just a really strong card, and if we're holding off on discarding because our hand's a bit awkward, he's at least going to get buffed from the unspent energy that we don't use. One thing I would like to see moving forward is if they added more discard cards to Pool 2. There's quite a few in Pool 3 that really are just basic that don't really need to belong there. They kind of feel underwhelming when you get them in Pool 3 because there's so many other exciting options that if they're in Pool 2, it would help with the discard decks early and make them a little bit more fun and consistent early on. Alright, now let's evolve from Pool 2 to Pool 3. Pool 3 is by far discard's biggest evolution. We have cards now like Hela or Hell Cow. Lots of hellish things. Ghost Rider. It's getting pretty dark over here, but it's getting strong because Hela Discard is one of the best decks in the meta. But we also have some of the weakest cards that are in this pool, like Black Bolt. Black Bolt almost never gets played. He discards a card from your opponent's hand, the lowest one, which at that point in the game, when he's a 5-drop, is kind of underwhelming. Black Cat is also kind of weak. She gets discarded if not played on the turn that she is drawn, or if she's in your hand, she gets discarded. Not too shabby with discard synergy, but can kind of ruin your draws sometimes, so not always the best, but not terrible. But another staple is Dracula. Dracula is a fantastic card that actually can't be countered. He doesn't have an ongoing ability or anything like that. There's no way to directly counter Dracula. He's going to discard a card from your hand at the end of the game and apply that power to him, which can be pretty wild when the only card in your hand is an Infinite, right? That's 20 power, and you only actually played 4 for it very early on. But as I was saying earlier, some of the cards that I think that could be added to Pool 2 from this pool right here is stuff like Colleen Wing. Colleen Wing is similar to Lady Sif, except she discards the lowest cost card in your hand, and she's a 2/4. I think that's really nicely fits into Pool 2, right? Helps activate your Swarm a little bit more consistently. Another one would be Hellcow. He discards 2 cards from your hand. Now, he used to be 2/6 and absolutely out of control. It was the highest win rate card in the game. Now, I think it's in a more fair place. It plays into the discard synergy, but it's not going to utterly win every game. So playing off of the deck that we've continued to evolve, on the right here, I've added Colleen Wing, Dracula, Hellcow, Magic, Sarah. Lots of big changes here. So we put in a little bit more consistency with our discard. We have Dracula, so that if we've discarded Apocalypse a bunch of times, he's going to discard Apocalypse one more time, get the bonus power, and then become probably a 15 for pretty well nothing. I even have Magic and Sarah here because I want to open up extra turns and discount my things so that I have more opportunities to discard my hand to apply more discards to hopefully Apocalypse. But this deck is just an evolution of one deck. See, when you're in Pool 1 and 2, you're probably going to have a deck that's called Discard and you're going to keep adding to it. But once you get into Pool 3, there's going to be a wide variety of cards and you're not going to get them all at once. Maybe you'll get Hela before you get Dracula, or Dracula before Hela, and you're going to have to maneuver that way. Or maybe you get a bunch of the discard synergy stuff way before you get anything else. So there's a lot of avenues we can go. So we can't just look at one deck in Pool 3, we have to look at extras. So I have 3 extra decks here, and these are all from a variety of websites that I found that are sort of top of the tier meta, performing very well, that revolve around discard. So you have Hela Discard that we talked about earlier. So Hela is going to resummon all the cards that you discarded this game at random locations, mind you. So what you really want to do is you want to discard those really high power, high cost cards so you don't have to pay for them, but you get to play them. Things like Infinite, Death, Doctor Doom, Giganto, all these cards are fantastic in Hela decks, and that's what this looks to set up. But there's a sneaky twist. Invisible Woman. So what you want to do is you hoard all those cards in your hand, and then you play Invisible Woman, and you play a bunch of your discard stuff hidden behind Invisible Woman, and then you Hela on turn 6. All those cards are going to get discarded from your hand and resummoned because of Hela. Really cool strategy, super fun. Then you got Dracunaut. This is a surprisingly good deck and doesn't require too many Pool 3 cards. If Dracula is one of your first cards in Pool 3, try this deck out. It's great. So the idea is just to play everything that comes into your hand as quickly and as much as possible and play Dracula so that the only thing in your hand at the end of the game is Infinite and he gets 20 power on that Dracula. Okay, and then lastly, there's a kind of a hybrid deck here of destroy and discard. They actually synergize fairly well with each other because you have cards like Wolverine that doesn't mind if it gets discarded, or destroyed, gets bounced around. And then the destroy synergy stuff doesn't matter too much if it gets discarded. It's going to be all right. You buff the Morbius at least, so there's a silver lining. But ultimately, this deck out of all of them seems the least consistent to me, but I can see how it works. Alright, and that is your discard evolution through the collection road of Marvel Snap as of at least October 2022. I'm sure things are going to continue to evolve. There's a bunch of data mine cards that have the word discard. Go check out my data mine series. I cover every card that's been data mined so far, and there's some really interesting ones that I can't wait to come to Marvel Snap. I'm going to do every keyword, and we're going to look at the evolution and how things grow throughout the collection road. And hopefully this helps you foresee what you want, cards you want in the future if you don't have them yet, and then maybe help with some deck building as well. Anyways, thank you so much for hanging out. Snap subscribe if you're not already subscribed. I'd really appreciate it, and I will catch you guys next time.